name is Margaret Squire. I'm 93 years and 7 months. I was born in Újszentes, Hungary. I graduated from university in 1941 in June. This was at Holy Names College, and the friends that I had made, they said, "What are you going to do for the summer, or now that we're graduates?" And all three of them said, "We're going to OCE." And I said, "What's OCE?" And they said, "Ontario College of Education." And I said, "What are you going to do there?" "Well, we're going to be teachers." "Okay, so I'll be a teacher." They said, "No, you don't do it that way." I said, "Listen, I live on a farm, I milk cows, I clean out pig pens, I help everything, I have to go out and stook the wheat, I have to hoe the corn. I don't want to be a farmer. I'm going to be a teacher." And when they sent me to a one-room country school, that really closed my mind to teach, because I loved it. You can't take a girl from the country, but you can't take the country out of the girl. And I taught 4 years in a one-room country school before I married, and I loved every moment of it. And I realized that teaching was what I wanted all my life. If any one of my students from that school, they would be now in their 70s, walked in and you said to them, "What do you remember best about your teacher?" And the answer would be her stories. When it came about 4:30, I'd say, "All right," no, about 4:15, I'd say, "All right, if you hurry and get your lesson and your work done, then we'll quit at 4:30 and I'll tell you a story. I'll read you a story." So, all right, they finished really quickly. Then I took out a book and I started to read. Well, they were bored. They were not paying attention. This was not working. So I put the book aside. I said, "All right, suppose I tell you a story." So I would tell them a story. Once upon a time, and da-da-da-da-da, and they were quietly walking through the woods, and they heard a noise. "Well, it's 4:45, time to go home." "Oh, miss, you can't stop. We'll pick it up tomorrow night." 4:30 came. They had their work all done and were already waiting to see what would happen next. And night after night, day after day, I told stories. I made them up as I went along. And it always ended with, "And then there was a shot. Time to go home." When I started teaching high school, I never realized how much I loved teaching. I loved my one-room country school, but I was 21 years at Amherst, and that definitely is a highlight in my life. Oh, I could keep you here until tonight to tell you stories. The technical department came to me with this student. He has been thrown out of every class. He just could not behave. And he was smart. But we finally had a test. And he handed in his paper. He wrote. Throughout the test, he wrote. He was a good kid now. He wasn't bothering me anymore. But I looked at that paper and I thought, "Good heavens, Lord, what do I do with it?" I couldn't even read his name. So he picked it up. And he looked at me and he said, "I can't read." And I said, "What about the writing?" He said, "I was so much trouble in school, nobody bothered with me, and I never learned to write. What am I going to do with this kid?" But I asked him every question, and he could answer every question, correctly or partially correctly, but he could not write. I got hauled into the office when the report cards came out. The principal wanted to know, how is it that this boy has failed every subject that he's taking except mine? Why are you playing favorites? And I knew he was going to do that, so I brought in the paper and showed him the paper that the kid had written, the first paper he ever written. I said, "He can't write and he can't read, and I have been doing after-class work with him. But that's not your job." I said, "My job is teaching, and this student needs teaching." I taught him to write. I don't know how well I taught him to write or read, but he is a businessman in town here today yet, and has a secretary who does all his writing. But that's the kind of thing that teachers should be doing. I was a very strict teacher, but the kids always said, "You were strict, but you were fair." And we learned in your class. We didn't fool around. My husband used to say, "Are you married to me or that damn school?" Because I lived my heart and soul for that school. You asked the question about teaching. I loved teaching. From the time I came to Canada, I've always loved traveling. I took every opportunity I could. I walked in the Dead Sea. I walked on the Via Dolorosa, where Jesus walked, to actually see these places and learn. You're not only learning geography, you're learning a nation's culture, their way of life, their people, their language, their food habits. It's an education, a total education. But there are so many experiences. Greece and Rome and Spain and Portugal. I have visited over 80 countries, 87, making slides of the experiences which I then showed to groups that requested them. I took my grandson on a cruise to the Caribbean, and we sat at a table with a very interesting group of people. One of the men was a publisher in Texas, and when he paused in his talk, my grandson said, "My grandmother is writing a book." And he looked at me and says, "You are?" And I said, "Well, we have a local paper, and I write the articles, the collection of things from my cruises, my trips, and the publisher said, 'Why don't you put these in a book?' So I'm considering it." He said, "Oh, what kind of a book, a novel?" And I said, "No, it'll be a travelogue." And he said, "Oh, have you got a title?" And I decided, when I started this, call it Hither and Yon, Hither and Yon. And my grandson snickered and said, and he looked at it and he said, "You don't like that title?" And my grandson said, "Well, who would buy a book called Hither and Yon?" I said, "Okay, come on. What better title have you got?" He said, "I think she should call it Globetrotting Granny." And the publisher said, "Now that will sell." And that's how I got the title of the book. I wrote 2 books, Globetrotting Granny and Globetrotting Great Granny, which sold successfully. I'm 93. I've had people say, "Why don't you act your age? Don't you think it's time that you stop being so silly?" But that's it. It's fun. Smile, and the world smiles with you. Weep, and you weep alone. And I lived life for 93 years, good and bad. Only God knows how many more I have to live. But I will continue to enjoy myself as much as possible, and hopefully bring to many others. All these things I have tried to teach to my children. If you have read all this, thank you.